Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking our favourite whisper from our favourite fleshy nightmare tree, Il'gynoth. Because here's the thing about old Illy. He's made of wood, yes. He has many eyes, yes. But he is also one talkative tree whose musings throughout the Emerald Nightmare boss fight has given lore nerd creators like me sustenance and life every day since he arrived on the scene. Because if you like speculation, and we do, then this shit is gold dust. Void dust, gold dust. And with 8.2 and the rise of Azshara, many of these whispers that we've been talking about for literally years at this point have been definitively explained. The Diamond King who was made a pawn, Azshara reveals in her boss fight in Eternal Palace, that was Magni. Oh, you worked that one out, did you? Well, congratulations, Holmes. You are an IQ 300 riddle-solving baller, but how did you fare with these? To find him, drown yourself in the circle of stars. Turns out that was referring to the Titan facility, which is literally N'Zoth's prison, which Azshara's Naga Palace is built on top of, which is simply named the Circle of Stars. Solved, thank you very much, 8.2. But there are other whispers that still continue to confound our tiny little non-game dev brains even now. The boy king serves at the master's table. 3 lies will he offer you is a personal favourite of mine, but for many of us, the most intriguing, the most tantalising, and probably overall the most important of the unsolved mysteries so far has to be, at the hour of her third death, she will usher in our coming. And the reason this is such a great whisper and showcases pretty much all that is fun about old god whispers is not just that the stakes for this whisper are so high, although they are. I mean, whoever this whisper refers to will be indirectly responsible for the return of something very bad and probably very tentacly, but also because there are so many characters that this whisper could feasibly be about. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Taliesin, it's extremely obvious who Il'gynoth is talking about here. It's this person. But here's the thing. Whoever you think it is, I guarantee you that even now, even after that Eternal Palace raid cinematic, there are a huge number of people who don't agree with you and have very good reasons for thinking it might be someone else. So in this Taliesin Talks, we are going to look at what I would consider to be the top 4 candidates, from the obvious to the not so obvious. So join us as we ask and maybe answer the question, whose third death will usher in their coming? Okay, go, 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 go. Let's get this one out of the way straight up, because let's be honest, not all of us are a super amazing mega lore nerd like Nobble, and so when our tentacly tree boy first mentioned the hour of her third death, most of us just went, oh, who do we know who has died a couple of times already? Oh, of course, that'll be Sylvanas Windrunner then. Case closed, good work, see when all that shit goes down, can't wait. And in fairness, if you were of the opinion that Sylvanas is our third death girl, then honestly, the events of Battle for Azeroth so far will not have done much to dissuade you. She's burned down trees, she's destroyed her own capital, she's slaughtered civilians, she's attempted to mind control undead, she's tried to have Saurfang assassinated, she's tried to have Thrall assassinated, she's tried to have Bane executed, and she's currently sending Nathanos off to do the bidding of a creepy old god dagger while the rest of the horde plot her overthrow. Basically, it's not looking totally unlikely that Sylvanas will be a raid boss that we will all have to fight very soon. And if that happens, then I guess we will be dishing out a nice, big, healthy serving of third death to her. And that will usher in the coming of... Okay, look, I'm just going to say the old gods, okay? I know technically we don't know that for certain, but I'm just going to go ahead and say the old gods for the rest of this video, because I'm done with being coy about it. Maybe Void Lords. But that's why many people throughout the expansion, and even now, after the recent events in Eternal Palace, are still adamant that the third death refers to Sylvanas. But of course, because everyone watching this video is a super WoW lore expert aficionado, we all know it's definitely not. Because if we were to kill Sylvanas at the end of BFA, it wouldn't actually be her third death, would it? It would be her fourth. Sylvanas' first and most famous death came at the hands of Arthas in Warcraft 3, later retold in both the Sylvanas Warbringer and Blood Elf Heritage Armor questline. She was Ranger General of Silvermoon and fell protecting her city from the Scourge on onslaught, but not before pissing the moody blonde one off enough that he took revenge over his fallen nemesis by raising her as a banshee to do his bidding. Death number 1. Fast forward a few years to the novel Edge of Night. Sylvanas has escaped Arthas's control, regained her original body, built up her Forsaken faction, set up shop under the ruins of Lordaeron, and teamed up with the Horde. Arthas has finally been killed by Tyrion and, well, me, and Sylvanas realizes that with the Lich King dead, she hasn't really got anything else to not live for, and throws herself from the top of Icecrown onto the Saronite spikes below, where she realizes that total death is actually really horrible and scary, and Arthas's Valkyr show up and say, "Bind yourselves to us and we'll get you out of this shit," to which Sylvanas says, "Yes please get me out of this shit." Death number 2. Fast forward another couple of years to Cataclysm. Garrosh is war chief, Sylvanas is disobeying orders by destroying Gilneas with Blight, and using her new Valkyr to raise enemy soldiers as new Forsaken. Basically, she does not give a shit at this point, and after leading the fight against the Gilnean counterattack, sneaky raised Lord Godfrey only goes and bloody shoots Sylvanas, and that's it, she dead now, she dead. It taking the sacrifice of no less than 3 of her shiny new Valkyr to bring the Dark Lady back from death. Number 3. So look, I am not saying that Sylvanas won't end up being a Garrosh 2.0 let's get her boys BFA raid boss. I don't actually think she will, but that's unimportant. But if she is, and we kill her, that's going to be death number 4. 5 if you count the death of her beautiful sexy belly button in Legion, but I'm happy to call it 4. So unless Blizz are planning some sneaky rejigging of how many times she has actually died, which would be very unlike them, to be honest. I mean, I can't even think of a single time when they've ever done anything like that. It would be very out of character for Blizzard. Then whoever Tree Daddy is whispering about, and whoever will usher in the old gods coming, it is not Sylvanas. In fact, I rate her chances of being third Death Girl as epoxy 1 burning tree out of Xalatan. And if it's not the Dark Lady and a number 1 horrible BFA baddie person that we've got to worry about here, who is it? One day, when World of Warcraft game director Ian Hazakostas was delivering our regular Blizzard shill money in a brown envelope to our house, he told me in Evitel to our faces that by the end of the 8.2 Azshara's Eternal Palace raid, we would all know who the very final boss of Battle for Azeroth would be. And that's what we confidently told everyone. Hey, don't worry guys, no less than Ian Hazakostas says we'll all know by the end of that raid, yeah? And that might be true, sort of. I mean, it certainly seems like N'Zoth is now free and ready to roll, and both the Horde and Alliance are talking about the importance of teaming up to stop that big bad threat, so I guess it's N'Zoth. But something else happened at the end of that raid that has got people talking for different reasons. The death and rise of Queen Azshara. Oh yeah, sorry, spoilers for the end of the Eternal Palace raid, sorry. But Queen Azshara, like Sylvanas, is one of the biggest, most important, most badass characters in WoW lore. But unlike Sylvanas though, we've actually seen very little of her in-game up until now. She was the super powerful mage queen of the Night Elves at the time of the Sundering, which was basically her fault because she teamed up with the Legion and was using the Well of Eternity to let them into Azeroth, which meant Tyrande, Malfurion and Illidan had to blow up the Well of Eternity, and that's why we all live on separate continents now, and that's why we have the Maelstrom now. As shown in the Azshara Warbringer, as the queen and her people were dragged into the murky depths during the Sundering, Azshara got an offer that she couldn't refuse from our favourite many-eyed tentacle lord. And lo, Azshara, Queen of the Night Elves, is dead. Long live Azshara, Queen of the Naga. Fast forward 10,000 years, and Azshara lures us all to a big hole in the ocean that she's made with the Tidestone of Golganeth, and then into her Eternal Palace, which also just so happens to be the Titan facility which is keeping N'Zoth imprisoned, where she intends to use the power from our Hearts of Azeroth to release him, just like she promised she would, like seriously 10,000 years ago. And furthermore, she succeeds, but not before me and my raid totally kill her after like quite a lot of pulls for her second death. N'Zoth has other plans for her though, and seemingly brings her back to life before whisking her away with him into the darkness. And if she's alive again, well, that means we can kill her again for her third death. So is Azshara our girl? She certainly seems the favourite amongst the community right now, and I totally agree. It feels like Blizzard is purposely setting this up. 2 of Imagoth's whispers were explained during the course of the Azshara boss fight. Is this basically them explaining the 3rd death line too? And it would be a really natural progression to pull off from here. We clearly haven't seen the last of Azshara, thank goodness, because she's an absolutely awesome character, and I don't know about you, but I pretty much need more of her sass going forward. I depend on it, I feed on it, I gain sustenance from it. Like, if the next expansion was called Azshara, Sass of the Sass Queen, I'd be totally down with that, sign me up. But if we did, say, all team up for Horde and Alliance fun times and go to face off against N'Zoth using the power of friendship, which it certainly seems like Lorthamar, Thalyssra, Gen and Jaina are planning right now, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine one of the fights on our way to the God of the Deep being a new, extra voidy, extra tentacly Azshara. Is it? And if we were to defeat her, and if she were to die her 3rd death at our hands, and that were to usher in the coming of the old gods, well, that sounds like a pretty exciting final battle of the expansion to me, to be honest. Or, you know, maybe it won't be this expansion, maybe it'll be something we come to later, but either way, it does certainly seem to be aligning nicely, doesn't it? One little gripe I know some people have with this theory is that they don't count Azshara being transformed into a Naga as a death. They maintain that N'Zoth turned her into a disturbingly attractive fish person specifically to save her life, and that's a good point, which is worth discussing, because I don't disagree with it. I mean, importantly, I don't think Blizzard care. I think they would totally be happy to say that she has died 2 deaths at this point. I certainly think that they want us to believe that, but more philosophically, even if she didn't physically die during the Sundering, her Night Elf empire, which was built in her image, which was her whole identity and was an embodiment of her, did. Even if she didn't physically die at the end of Eternal Palace, once again, her second 10,000-year-old empire, again built in her image, albeit a more fish-like image now, did. For someone who cares about power and ruling over others as much as Azshara does, having that power taken away from her, as has happened twice now, equates to a death, in my opinion. So that's it then. Azshara is our lady. Well, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if she was, and we're going to rate her chances at a very healthy 9,000 years spent not really doing much out of 10,000. But the reason I'm not 100% super certain about that is because, frankly, there's another couple of candidates who I think are really very interesting indeed. Another Windrunner. The oldest Windrunner, and much as I love Sylvanas, and I really do, especially the don't give a shit Sylvanas that we've had since Arthas died, in my opinion, the most interesting Windrunner. As part of the Sons of Lothar, Alleria went through the Dark Portal with Khadgar, Turalyon, Danath, and Kudran to be total badasses, while Ner'zhul accidentally destroyed the Orc homeworld with his deranged portal madness, which is the entire reason why those guys have statues dedicated to them in Stormwind. As it turns out, she and Turalyon escaped to, and okay, you're just gonna have to go with me on this for the sake of time, another kind of plane of existence, sort of, where they joined the Army of the Light under the Prime Naru, Zera, and time worked differently there, and basically it took 1,000 years, during which time Turalyon got some cool lightforged armor, and Alleria discovered the Void, after she was infected with it on a Legion prison planet, the Void having killed all of the demons there permanently. Under the tutelage of the ethereal Locust Walker, she became a student of this new power and learned how to control it, which is just as well, because she then went on to consume the whole essence of a Void Cycle Naru at the end of the Makari dungeon in Legion, and she's basically just really full of Void right now. We see the effect that this has on her in the Three Sisters comic, having to endure and ignore constant whispers that tell her to kill Turalyon, the father of her child, and her sister Sylvanas. She says that far from seeing her Void powers as a gift, she sees them as a constant struggle to be overcome, and that she uses the thought of her son, Arator, as an anchor almost to keep them in check, which is all very well and good and very cool, but what has it got to do with Il'gynoth's 3rd Death Whisper? Well, I'm glad you asked, let me tell you. In the aftermath of Antorus, Alleria and Turalyon can be found looking at their statues in Stormwind, which, let's be honest, we can now see are pretty rubbish statues. I mean, they look nothing like them, but fine, whatever. And during the conversation, Alleria says that with being stranded on Draenor and then 1,000 years later consuming the Void Naru, sometimes I feel like I have already died twice, which can only be a very explicit reference to the Il'gynoth whisper that we heard earlier in that very expansion. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Alleria is currently probably the closest thing to a Void Lord that exists on Azeroth. The Void is in constant contact with her, trying to tell her what to do. She uses Void portals to teleport around. She's like really, really purple a lot of the time. We don't actually know the kind of power that she's capable of wielding or how much control she really has over it. It's very easy to see her being a very important part of the Old Gods or Void Lords arriving on our little planet, either by mistake or completely on purpose. Because yeah, she says she feels like she's already died twice, but she hasn't really died twice, has she? That would be some pretty poetic license being used in the Tree Whisper there, which could totally be possible. I think it's useful to think of these words as obscure metaphors most of the time, but I like to think that there could actually be a more interesting and horrifying explanation here. What if her third death doesn't refer to the third time Alleria dies, but the third death she has to endure? More specifically, the third family death she has to endure. Follow me on this. Since we've been reunited with her in Legion, she has had to come to terms with her sister Sylvanas' death and subsequent undeath, family death number 1. Then there's Turalyon. When we first meet Arator in the Burning Crusade, he tells us about a dream that he keeps having, where under crimson skies, he kneels over the crushed body of his father and weeps. Turalyon's death has been foretold in this dream for over 10 years now. And if that death were to come to pass soon, under a crimson sky, not that I can think of any crimson skies that have featured in the game recently, but there might be some, that would be Alleria's second family death. And then there's Arator himself, the child of light and shadow, the child whose safety Alleria values over anything else, the focus she uses to stop herself from succumbing to the void. If something were to happen to him, that would be Alleria's third death that she's had to deal with, and the one that might just be enough to push her over the edge into full-on void shitshow bad times, which, by the way, is the exact scenario that we predicted way back in September 2017, just saying. I think it is totally believable that the deaths of her sister, partner, and finally her son could be enough to diminish Alleria's resistance to the void, with that third death, that of Arator, being the one that finally breaks her heart enough to give herself fully over to the power of the void, ushering in their coming. It maybe doesn't sound as likely as Queen Azshara, but it's actually my favourite possible scenario in this whole video. So F it, I'm going to rate the chances of Alleria being our third Death Lady at a strong 7 dead Arators out of Locust Walker. Boom! Hello, it's me, Taliesin, on a completely different day, wearing a completely different shirt, and with an extra bonus option for this video that wasn't in the original script. Because since BFA patch 8.25 hit the PTR, and we got a proper eyeful of all those new sexy models, there has only been one name on everyone's lips. Wrathion, he's the one we want on our lips. But also, Calia Menethil, who, true to the events of Before the Storm, where Arthas' sister and true heir to the Lordaeron throne, if the Lordaeron throne still existed, which it doesn't, looks set to finally appear in her new light-powered undead form. And a lot of people are thinking now, oh, hang on, maybe Calia could be our third death gal. If we want to get philosophical, and we literally just did in a really big way when we were talking about Alleria, didn't we? Then her first death would be her losing her kingdom, her family, and her people in the Scourge decimation of Lordaeron in Warcraft 3, and her rebirth as a priest under Alonsus Foul's tutelage. Her second death is a bit more literal at the hands of Sylvanas in the ill-fated Forsaken and Human reunion party in Stromgarde, which means for anyone that can count as far as 2, she is 2/3 of the way towards the required 3 deaths, and oh, they better get ready, because their coming is about to get ushered the shit in if she were to die again, right? Even more compellingly, part of the power behind Kalia's latest resurrection was a Naru. And we know that a natural part of a Naru's life cycle is to go all voidy and purpley at some point. Sarah, Kalia's light mummy, was in just such a state when we first encountered her in the Netherlight Temple. So if the source of her powers were to result in Calia sharing some characteristics of the Naru, might Calia be in line for a dark cycle herself? Then no one would even have to physically kill her. Her third death would be becoming a void Calia and choosing to usher in her lordy masters of her own free will. It's certainly an interesting idea, and one which I could get totally excited for. But personally, I think Calia's existence, her reason for being in this story, is different, and that another purpose awaits the final Menethil. Basically, I think Calia is going to be used to enable Alliance Forsaken. Not Lightbound Forsaken or anything like that. I think Calia will remain unique in the light-powered corpse stakes. Except maybe Uther, maybe though. But rather, the actual Forsaken as they exist now in the Horde, defecting to the Alliance to follow their true queen as they see her. We know from before the storm that a fair number of Sylvanas' followers are growing tired of their outcast status and still see themselves as Lordaeron citizens. It's not hard to imagine that once word gets out that Calia Menethil, their old princess, is not only still around, but is now an undead just like them, and possibly offering them a hope of reintegrating back into human society in some way, that at least a handful would be tempted to make that switch. And lo, Alliance Forsaken. Except obviously they won't be called Forsaken anymore, they'd be called like Redeemed or something, I guess. I would be totally in favour of all this from a lore perspective. The existential worries of the Forsaken as they struggle to decide what they actually are is the reason that Before the Storm is my favourite WoW novel of all, and to see some of those Forsaken tentatively coming back to the Alliance, and the excellent stories that could help create as their living families and friends react to them in such a rich tapestry of horrified and heartbreaking ways, would be a super interesting avenue to explore. As would their relationship with those Forsaken who they considered kin, but who chose to stay in the Horde. And that is what I think, okay fine, that's what I hope the future has in store for Calia. So whereas I do totally understand people excitedly talking about her in terms of the third Death Whisper, and I could totally see her being our girl, I'm going to rate Calia Menethil right now at a more important things to do 6 lore abominations out of Middan. There has been a lot of talk in WoW circles recently about the Shadowlands, partly because of the supposed leak of the next expansion, but also because, frankly, it's been something that everyone has been talking about for the last year anyway, since the action in BFA made it abundantly clear that death and its various forms and planes were going to feature very strongly in the story of WoW going forward. And it's easy to get caught up in the more immediate stuff, like Bronsamdi and his mysterious boss, the Drust and the weird new undead realm of Thros, Vol'jin popping in and out to remind us that being dead doesn't have to be too big a deal in the long run, Mon, and of course Sylvanas' continued addiction to raising dead soldiers, either as mindless necromantic shells or as night elf shaped Forsaken, which is always fun. But there's one very important death person that we already had a lot to do with last expansion already, Helya. Now it's understandable if you don't know all this, but there's more to Helya than just a tentacly ship-destroying Death Realm badass. She was originally a Titan-forged and adopted daughter of Odin. She helped create the elemental plane and fought against the old gods and their forces to defeat the original Black Empire. Yes, fighting the old gods is literally her original reason for being. When Odin had a tantrum about the dragon aspects being infused with the power of the Pantheon, he raised part of Uldum into the sky and created the Halls of Valor, where he requested the Valkyr to take the spirits of the worthy away from the Shadowlands and send them to his new Gaff, where they could be made into Valajar. The one big problem with this plan was that there was no such thing as Valkyr at that point, so Odin turned Helya into the very first one, against her wishes, to do the job. Yeah, basically Odin is a total dick, and it's completely understandable that Helya is a bit pissed off with him. And also, if you don't count being turned into the very first Valkyr and being sent to live in the Shadowlands forever as a first death, then I really don't know what your death criteria is, to be honest. After Loken restored Helya's free will and she helped F Odin right up, she escaped the Shadowlands and set up her own death realm of Helheim for unworthy Vrykul spirits, which is where we found her in Legion, making a deal with Sylvanas in exchange for her magic Valkyr controlling lamp thing. Now, famously, of course, we still don't know what Sylvanas' part of that deal was. The new leak suggests that they work together to divert souls away from Azeroth, who's trying to eat them all or whatever. And fine, to be honest, it probably is something to do with souls, isn't it? That would make sense. Anyway, we killed Helya at the end of the Helheim mini-raid, again, after quite a few pulls, for death number 2, and that looked to be that, but no, because in Battle for Azeroth you can find the Ring of Reefs, which we made a video about, and if you take that to Valdemar Stormseeker, they will tell you you cannot kill death and that Helya is currently growing in power once again. Whew. Did you follow that? It doesn't matter. Basically, Helya currently has had 2 deaths, is very likely to feature heavily in the next expansion, and if she were to die for a 3rd time and usher in the coming of the, well, you get the idea. This option is a super interesting one for me, partly because we know so little about Helya or her motivations. Yeah, she was created, like all of the original Titanforged, to battle against the old gods and the Black Empire, but would she still care about that and join the fight against an emergent Azeroth, or is she still more concerned with getting revenge on Odin? What was the deal that she made with Sylvanas, and how would Helya dying again usher in the coming of the old gods or the Void Lords? If the Shadowlands leak is to be believed, which I don't really think it should, but you do you, then Helya is currently, right now, on the front lines of the fight against an emergent Nyalotha in the Shadowlands. If she is now on our side, maybe her death results in the old gods being able to finally break through and get the soully power they need to be reborn. But whatever the specifics, whether I think Helya is 3rd death gal or not, we are certainly going to be seeing a lot more of her very soon, which is fine by me, because seriously, look at this big beautiful angel woman. The more we see of her, the better. Let's see all of her, please. So I am going to rate Helya a hopeful 8 4chan leaks out of Reddit. But what do you think, guys? How do you rate my candidates, and who do you think will usher in their coming with her 3rd death? Is it someone that I haven't mentioned in this video at all? I would love to hear your thoughts on this, so let me know how wrong I am in the comments below. And also, please appreciate that I've gone through this entire video without making a single coming joke like a real adult, and it was harder than I thought it would be. Oh, and thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to make all of our work happen, and that's the legit truth. Without you guys, there'd be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel, so thank you, genuinely. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Mr. GM, or should that be Mr. Twitch Partner GM? No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.